The scream cut through the sound of traffic like a knife through glass. It was sharp, terrified, and desperate, the kind of sound that makes even strangers stop mid-step. On a quiet suburban street in Tulsa, the mid-afternoon sun blazed down as an elderly woman clutched her purse to her chest. Her trembling hands were no match for the masked man who lunged toward her, yanking it away with a gun glinting in his hand. She cried out, stumbling backward, her knees buckling as she fell beside the gas station curb. Her grocery bag tore open, apples rolling across the concrete like scattered marbles. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then, just a few feet away, 4 men in black leather vests turned their heads. The patches on their backs read Hell's Angels. Their conversation died mid-laugh, replaced by silence and sharp focus. Eleanor Marks had lived 74 careful years, always believing that danger happened somewhere else. She was a retired schoolteacher, a widow of a war veteran, and the kind of woman who still said thank you to traffic lights when they turned green. Every Tuesday, she walked to Miller's Diner for a slice of apple pie and a chat with the waitress who reminded her of her late daughter. That little cafe was her refuge from the quiet of her house, where only the ticking of a clock filled the space. But today, as she stepped out into the sun, her simple routine collided with cruelty. The man in the hoodie didn't see a grandmother. He saw an easy target. When he lunged, her first thought wasn't about the money, but about the photo inside her purse, the one of her husband in uniform smiling beside their daughter. She clutched it tight, refusing to let go. The strap snapped. She fell. Pain shot up her arm as the man tore the bag away and ran. Her scream followed him down the street, echoing through the air like a prayer made of fear. Across the street, Maddox Hale's jaw tightened. The biker leader didn't move at first, just watched the man sprint past the gas station. Then his gaze flicked to the trembling old woman on the curb. In that instant, his instincts took over. No words were needed. The other men, Ryder, Cole, and Dean, were already standing, their bodies tense, engines gleaming in the sunlight. Eleanor's shaking hand pointed weakly toward the thief, her voice barely a whisper. "He took my purse. He had a gun." Maddox nodded once, his eyes hard as iron. The air changed, the kind of quiet that comes right before thunder. He turned the key in his bike, and the engine came alive with a roar that rolled through the street. The others followed. Tires screeched. Gasoline fumes filled the air. The peaceful afternoon shattered under the sound of vengeance on 2 wheels. And for the first time in years, Eleanor felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not fear, but hope. The engines roared like thunder chasing lightning. Maddox Hale led the charge down the narrow street, his long black coat snapping behind him in the wind. The thief looked over his shoulder, his breath ragged as panic clawed through his chest. He darted between parked cars, clutching the purse like a lifeline, but the rumble of motorcycles closed in fast. Ryder veered left, cutting off his escape toward the alley. Cole accelerated from the right, blocking the crossroad. The man skidded to a stop, spinning wildly, realizing too late that the walls were closing in. Maddox didn't shout or curse. He just watched, eyes locked on his target. The man raised the gun, hands shaking, sweat pouring down his forehead. His voice cracked as he yelled, "Stay back. I swear I'll shoot." Maddox didn't flinch. He'd seen men bluff with louder threats and steadier hands. He brought his bike to a stop, the engine rumbling low like an animal waiting for the kill. Slowly, he dismounted, boots striking pavement with measured step. The world around him seemed to shrink until only 2 people existed, the desperate thief and the man who had already decided how this would end. Cole and Ryder circled their bikes around, hemming the man in tighter. Dean stood behind, phone already dialing the police. The thief took a step back, his heels scraping against a brick wall. His gun hand trembled. His courage faltered. Then Maddox moved, fast, precise, unhesitating. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it hard until the gun fell to the ground. The thief cried out, but Maddox wasn't angry. He was controlled, firm, deliberate. "You pointed a gun at someone's grandmother," he said quietly, voice colder than the steel in his hand. "You meant it." Cole picked up the purse and brushed off the dirt. Inside, he saw the photograph, an old black and white image of a soldier smiling in uniform. He looked at Maddox, who froze for a heartbeat, recognizing the same medal his father once wore. The man who'd led him into the world before life led him astray. For a moment, the hard shell of the biker cracked just enough for something human to show through. The sirens began to wail in the distance. Dean flagged them down, explaining the situation as the officers arrived. Maddox handed over the thief without another word. The cops exchanged looks that carried both gratitude and unease. They knew this crew by name, by rumor, by reputation. But today, the lines between sinner and savior blurred. As the squad car drove off, Maddox glanced back toward the diner at the end of the street. He saw the old woman standing there, hands clasped to her chest, watching. He didn't know it yet, but the moment he decided to answer her scream, something inside him had already started to change. The gun hit the pavement with a sharp metallic clatter that echoed off the brick walls, but the silence that followed was heavier than any noise. The thief's breath came in ragged gasps, eyes darting wildly between the bikers. He looked young, too young to have thrown his life away for a handful of bills. Maddox didn't speak. He just picked up the fallen purse, his gloved fingers brushing over its worn leather as he opened it carefully. Inside, he found a wallet, a small locket, and a faded photograph tucked between the folds. The photo showed a smiling soldier in uniform beside a woman in a summer dress. Maddox's gaze lingered on it for a long second. Something in his chest shifted. He remembered his own father's jacket folded in a box somewhere, the one thing he hadn't had the guts to throw away. Cole came up beside him. "It's all still here," he said quietly. "Not even $1 missing." Maddox nodded, his eyes still on the photograph. The sound of sirens grew louder. Ryder leaned on his bike, watching the thief slump against the wall, his face pale, his gun hand shaking. The man tried to speak, maybe to beg, but no one wanted to hear it. The cops pulled up with lights flashing red and blue, washing the alley in color. 2 officers stepped out, hands on their holsters, but their expressions changed when they saw Maddox and his crew standing calmly by the subdued criminal. Maddox raised his hand, showing the purse. "He's all yours." Didn't get far. The officers cuffed the thief without a word. One of them, a younger cop with kind eyes, paused. "We appreciate it, Maddox. We really do." Maddox just gave a short nod, climbing back onto his bike. He didn't do it for thanks. He did it because the scream wouldn't stop echoing in his head. As the squad car drove away, Cole handed Maddox the purse. "You gonna give it back?" he asked. Maddox looked toward the diner. Through the window, he saw the old woman standing perfectly still, her eyes locked on him. She looked small, fragile, but there was something unbroken in her expression. Maybe it was courage. Maybe faith. He couldn't tell. He revved the engine once, the sound rolling down the street like a promise kept. The others followed as he drove slowly toward her. Eleanor Marks stood by the window, clutching her hands together, her lips moving in silent prayer. She didn't know what to expect from men like these, but she'd soon learn that heroes don't always wear badges or halos. Sometimes they wear leather and carry scars instead of medals. Chapter 4. Eleanor stood at the diner door, the afternoon sunlight washing over her as the 4 motorcycles pulled to a stop in front of her. Their engines idled like giant metal hearts still beating from the chase. Maddox dismounted first, holding the purse gently as if it were made of glass. She took a hesitant step forward, her voice trembling. "My husband, he always said good men don't need uniforms to do the right thing." Maddox looked at her, eyes softening beneath the shadow of his helmet. He handed her the purse. "Inside everything's there, ma'am." She opened it, fingers brushing the photograph. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered a thank you that carried more weight than words could hold. For a moment the world felt still again. The chaos, the fear, the noise, it all melted away in the space between 2 strangers who suddenly understood each other. Maddox wasn't a man used to gratitude. He'd lived through bars, fights, and bad choices, but not this. Not someone looking at him like he'd done something holy. He swallowed hard, nodding once. Just be careful out here. There's still good left in this world. Sometimes it just wears the wrong jacket. Eleanor smiled faintly through her tears. My husband would have liked you, she said softly. Maddox gave a faint smirk. Then he was a good man. He turned back toward his bike, the others already mounting up. The engines roared again, shaking the quiet street as they rolled away in formation, sunlight glinting off their chrome. The townsfolk who had watched from inside the diner stepped out slowly. A few clapped. Others just nodded, unsure what to make of what they'd seen. For years, those men had been whispered about as troublemakers, drifters, sinners. But now, the same people looked at them with something close to respect. Eleanor stood there, purse in hand, watching until the last flicker of tail light vanished down the road. She turned toward the gas station where her groceries still lay scattered. The apples had rolled against the curb, bruised but not broken. She gathered them quietly, her hands steady now. Maybe, she thought, that's what kindness really is, something that might get bruised but never destroyed. When she walked home that day, she didn't feel afraid anymore. The world, for all its darkness, had shown her a glimmer of light in the most unlikely place. And though the bikers would never know it, their act of courage had rippled through a small corner of the world that still needed reminding that good hearts exist, even under leather and scars. If this story touched your heart, remember it next time you hear someone cry for help. Because sometimes all it takes is one act of courage to remind us that good still wins, even when the world forgets how to believe in it. That night, the city of Tulsa breathed slower. The sirens were gone, the traffic thinned, and the diner lights dimmed one by one until only the neon, open, sign flickered in red against the dark windows. Maddox sat alone in his garage behind an old gas station on the edge of town. His bike gleamed under a single hanging bulb. The smell of oil and cigarette smoke filled the air. He'd patched up his knuckles, not because the fight had hurt, but because something deeper did, a thought that wouldn't leave him alone. The old woman's eyes. The way she'd looked at him like he'd done something right for once. He'd spent years trying not to care, pretending that the road was enough, that the noise of engines could drown out the guilt of old mistakes. But tonight, the silence was louder than any Harley could roar. Ryder knocked once before stepping in, carrying 2 beers. You good, brother? Maddox gave a tired half-smile. Yeah, just thinking. Ryder chuckled. That's always dangerous. He sat beside him, handing over a bottle. You know, I saw that lady after we left. She was talking to the cops, telling them you boys saved her life. Maddox stared at the ground. We didn't save her life. We just did what anyone should do. Ryder nodded. Maybe. But not everyone does. Across town, Eleanor couldn't sleep either. Her house felt different that night, less empty somehow. She placed her rescued purse on the nightstand, next to the photograph of her husband. The same picture those bikers had seen. She touched the frame softly. You would have liked them, Frank, she whispered. They reminded me of your boys from the unit. Tough on the outside, soft where it counts. She smiled faintly, tears forming again. For years, she'd prayed for a sign that kindness still existed in the world. That night, her prayer had come riding in on a Harley. The next morning, Maddox found a note slipped under the garage door. The handwriting was shaky, the ink faded. To the men who listened when I screamed. Thank you. Eleanor Marks. Inside the envelope was a small card from a charity foundation for veterans' families, with a check for $500 made out to Hell's Angels Chapter 77. Maddox stared at it, caught between disbelief and laughter. He could already hear Cole's voice teasing him. Guess we're respectable now, boss. But beneath the humor, something real stirred in him, a feeling he hadn't known in years. Respect earned not by fear, but by decency. And somewhere deep down, he knew this wasn't the end of that story. It was the start of something bigger. Chapter 6. By Friday afternoon, The diner on Miller Street was busier than usual. The waitress, a young blonde named Jenny, kept glancing out the window as if expecting ghosts on motorcycles. Then she froze. The familiar rumble rolled down the street, and one by one, 4 bikes stopped outside. Conversations hushed, coffee cups paused midair. Maddox stepped inside, removing his sunglasses. For a second, no one spoke. Then Eleanor rose from her corner booth, smiling like she'd been waiting all week. "You came back," she said softly. Maddox nodded, awkward but sincere. "Thought we'd try the pie you keep talking about." Laughter broke the tension. The other bikers followed, joking about calories and coffee strength. Jenny served them with a grin, snapping a picture when Eleanor insisted. The sight was strange and beautiful, the old teacher and the outlaws sharing pie like family. Maddox ate quietly, listening to Eleanor talk about her husband, about teaching kids who used to ride bikes just like his crew did now. Every word peeled another layer off his guarded shell. Somewhere between stories and laughter, he felt something loosen inside his chest. Before leaving, Eleanor handed him a small box wrapped in paper. Maddox frowned. "What's this?" She smiled. "My husband's medal. I want you to have it. You already earned it." He opened it slowly. The same silver emblem he'd seen in her photo gleamed inside. His throat tightened. "I can't take this, ma'am. That's yours." She shook her head. It belonged to a man who believed courage was contagious. "I think he'd want it with someone who still listens when the world screams." Maddox didn't know what to say. He simply nodded, slipping the medal into his vest pocket. When they rode away this time, it wasn't vengeance that powered their engines. It was peace. People waved as they passed, something no one had done before. Word had spread fast across town. The bad men who'd done a good thing were now part of its story. That night, under a sky of slow-moving clouds, Eleanor sat by her window, the sound of engines fading into memory. She whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, for courage, for kindness, and for second chances. On the other side of town, Maddox hung the medal above his workbench. The light caught it just right, and for the first time in years, he smiled without guilt. The road would still be long, but maybe, just maybe, he wasn't lost on it anymore.